The year was 1944. The world was engulfed in the flames of World War II, a conflict that had spread to nearly every corner of the globe. The Pacific Theater, in particular, was a vast expanse of ocean and islands where fierce battles were fought between the United States and the Empire of Japan. World War II raged across the Pacific, with each side vying for control of strategic locations. The battles were intense, marked by brutal combat and significant losses on both sides. It was a brutal conflict that pitted the United States against the Empire of Japan. The stakes were high, and the outcome of each battle could tip the balance of power in the region. On September 2nd, a squadron of American bombers took off from the aircraft carrier USS San Jacinto. These brave airmen were tasked with a critical mission that could potentially change the course of the war in the Pacific. Their mission was to cripple Japanese communications by striking a radio tower on the island of Chichijima, part of the Bonin Islands. This radio tower was a key component of the Japanese communication network, and its destruction would severely hamper their ability to coordinate defenses. The island, heavily fortified and strategically vital to the Japanese, held a dark secret, one that would remain hidden for decades. Chichijima was not just a military target, it was a place where unspeakable horrors had occurred. This mission would become a pivotal moment in the war, not for its military significance, but for the horrific fate that awaited the airmen shot down over Chichijima. The island's defenders were ruthless, and the captured airmen faced unimaginable suffering. Among the pilots on that fateful mission was a young George H.W. Bush, a future president of the United States. At just 20 years old, Bush was one of the youngest pilots in the Navy, yet he displayed remarkable courage and determination. He and his crewmates faced fierce anti-aircraft fire as they approached their target. The Japanese defenders were well prepared and unleashed a barrage of firepower to protect the radio tower. The sky erupted in a deadly ballet of explosions and tracers. The air was thick with smoke and the deafening roar of anti-aircraft guns. Each pilot knew that their chances of survival were slim, but they pressed on with unwavering resolve. For some, there would be no return. The mission exacted a heavy toll, and many brave airmen paid the ultimate price. Their sacrifice would be remembered as a testament to their bravery and dedication. This mission, a testament to the courage and sacrifice of the young men who fought in the Pacific Theater, would cast a long shadow. The stories of their heroism and the horrors they faced would be passed down through generations. It serves as a chilling reminder of the brutality and inhumanity of war. The events over Chichijima are a stark illustration of the high cost of conflict and the enduring impact it has on those who serve and the world they leave behind. George H.W. Bush, a fresh-faced 20-year-old lieutenant, piloted his TBM Avenger torpedo bomber through the maelstrom of enemy fire. The skies were a chaotic dance of tracer rounds and flak bursts, each one a potential end to his young life. The roar of engines and the distant thuds of anti-aircraft fire filled the air, a symphony of war that Bush had become all too familiar with. His plane, christened Barbara after his sweetheart back home, sustained heavy damage. The fuselage was riddled with bullet holes and smoke began to fill the cockpit. Despite the dire situation, Bush's training and determination kicked in. He knew he had to stay focused if he was to have any chance of survival. Despite the danger, Bush managed to complete his bombing run, releasing his payload on the target. The bombs fell away from the plane, their descent marked by a trail of smoke. The target below erupted in flames and debris, a testament to Bush's resolve and precision under pressure. As his crippled Avenger struggled to stay aloft, Japanese fighters closed in, their guns blazing. The enemy pilots were relentless, their planes darting through the sky like predatory birds. Bush's hands were steady on the controls, his mind racing with thoughts of evasion and survival. Bush, with remarkable composure, gave the order for his crew to bail out. He watched as his men leaped from the plane, their parachutes opening like flowers in the sky. Each one was a life saved, a small victory amidst the chaos. He followed his men into the ocean, his parachute billowing open above the churning waters. The cold shock of the sea was a stark contrast to the heat of battle, but there was no time to dwell on it. Survival was the only thing on his mind. Adrift in the vast Pacific, Bush clung to his life raft, his thoughts a mixture of fear and uncertainty. The ocean seemed endless, a vast expanse of blue that stretched to the horizon. Each wave was a reminder of his isolation. each moment a test of his endurance. For hours he drifted, the island of Chichijima a menacing silhouette in the distance. The island was occupied by enemy forces, a place of danger rather than refuge. Bush's mind raced with thoughts of capture and the unknown horrors that might await him. Unbeknownst to Bush, his ordeal was far from over. The hours dragged on, each one filled with the constant threat of discovery. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the salt water stung his eyes and skin. Yet he held on, driven by a will to survive. A Japanese patrol boat spotted him, forcing him to dive under the water, desperately clinging to his raft to avoid capture. The sound of the boat's engine grew louder, a harbinger of potential doom. Bush's heart pounded in his chest as he held his breath, praying for the boat to pass. Finally, after what must have seemed like an eternity, the submarine USS Finback surfaced nearby, rescuing the future president from the shark-infested waters. The sight of the submarine was a beacon of hope, a promise of safety. As he was pulled aboard, Bush knew he had been given a second chance at life, a chance that would shape his destiny in ways he could never have imagined. While George H.W. Bush escaped the clutches of the Japanese, 8 of his fellow airmen were not so fortunate. Their planes, riddled with bullets and shrapnel, crashed into the sea or on the unforgiving slopes of Chichijima. The survivors, battered and bruised but alive, managed to make their way ashore, hoping against hope for a swift rescue. They would soon discover the horrifying truth: capture by the Japanese meant a fate far worse than death. Among those captured were Navy pilots and air crewmen, Marv Mershon, Floyd Hall, Warren Earl Vaughan, Jimmy Dye, Grady York and others. Their ordeal began with brutal interrogations, the Japanese soldiers eager to extract information from their prisoners. The airmen, bound and blindfolded, were subjected to beatings, starvation and relentless psychological torture. Their captors, fueled by a potent mix of wartime propaganda and a deep-seated hatred for the enemy, showed no mercy. The prisoners were stripped of their dignity, their spirits slowly broken by the relentless cruelty inflicted upon them. Little did they know that their nightmare was just beginning. Section 4. The descent into horror, torture and brutality on Chichijima. The captured airmen, their bodies weakened by hunger and thirst, were herded into makeshift bamboo cages. The tropical heat and humidity turned their prison into a living hell. Disease was rampant, and the guards, indifferent to their suffering, offered no medical aid. Days turned into nights, each one a struggle for survival. The airmen, their uniforms now tattered rags, clung to life, sustained by a flicker of hope that somehow, someday, they would be rescued. Their captors, however, had other plans. The Japanese soldiers, desensitized by the brutality of war, seemed to relish in the suffering of their prisoners. The airmen were subjected to a litany of horrors, mock executions, waterboarding and beatings that left them bloodied and broken. Their screams, muffled by the walls of their bamboo prison, went unanswered. The guards, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of hatred, seemed to take pleasure in inflicting pain. The airmen, stripped of their humanity, were reduced to mere playthings for their sadistic captors. Section 5. Unthinkable acts, cannibalism and the cruelty of war. What transpired on that remote island in the Pacific went far beyond the pale of conventional warfare. The island, isolated and cut off from the rest of the world, became a stage for some of the most horrific acts of inhumanity ever recorded. The soldiers stationed there were subjected to extreme conditions, both physically and mentally, which pushed them to the brink of sanity. In a shocking act of barbarity, Japanese officers, led by the notorious General Yoshio Tachibana, committed acts of cannibalism against the American prisoners. These officers, who were supposed to uphold the honor and discipline of their military, instead descended into a state of primal savagery. Their actions were not just a violation of the rules of war, but a betrayal of basic human decency. It is a gruesome tale, one that speaks to the darkest depths of human depravity. The soldiers, already suffering from the horrors of war, were forced to endure unimaginable cruelty at the hands of their captors. The psychological trauma inflicted on them was as severe as the physical pain, leaving scars that would never heal. Driven by a perverse sense of ritual and warped sense of superiority, the officers did the unthinkable. They believed that consuming the flesh of their enemies would grant them strength and power, a belief rooted in ancient and barbaric traditions. This twisted ideology led them to commit acts that are almost beyond comprehension. According to eyewitness accounts from the War Crimes Tribunal, at least one of the airmen, Flyer Floyd Hall, was subjected to vivisection while still alive. The tribunal, which sought to bring justice to the victims, heard testimonies that painted a chilling picture of the events that took place on the island. The accounts were so horrific that they left even the most hardened judges and prosecutors in shock. His liver was extracted and served to Japanese officers at a dinner party. This macabre feast was not just an act of cannibalism, but a deliberate attempt to dehumanize and degrade the enemy. The officers, in their twisted minds, saw this as a way to assert their dominance and superiority over their captives. The details, even decades later, are difficult to stomach. The sheer brutality and inhumanity of the acts committed on that island continue to haunt the memories of those who survived and those who have heard their stories. The island, once a place of natural beauty, became a symbol of the darkest aspects of human nature. Other prisoners were beheaded, their organs removed and consumed in a grotesque display of savagery. These acts were not just about survival or desperation, but a calculated effort to instill fear and assert control. The prisoners, already weakened and demoralized, were subjected to the ultimate form of humiliation and degradation. The Japanese soldiers, desensitized to violence, participated in the consumption of human flesh. Their actions a horrifying testament to the dehumanizing effects of war. The constant exposure to death and destruction had eroded their sense of morality and humanity, turning them into instruments of terror and brutality. The airmen, their bodies desecrated, became victims not only of war, but of an unspeakable evil. Their sacrifice, however, serves as a stark reminder of the horrors of war and the depths to which humanity can sink. It is a story that must be told, not just to honor their memory, but to ensure that such atrocities are never repeated.